is just fantastic.
Hello everyone, welcome to a stripped back because of dental reasons exhibition of stupid people. If you see my community post from yesterday, you'll understand why. Today we are going to start with the trending topic from Twitter, Willy Wonka. This undoubtedly being a topic that is piggybacked off the recent success of the Willy Wonka movie, the prequel to, I hope, the Gene Wilder version. Recently, it came to light something called the immersive Willy Wonka experience was being promoted. This is a promotional image of it, by the way. Obviously, art will never quite capture what the real world will present. This is, though, I would argue, some of the best art I've seen in quite some time. It wouldn't look out of place on DeviantArt if DeviantArt wasn't now entirely porn. Sorry, artistic nudity. Now, I mentioned this would in and of itself create an unrealistic standard of expectation. When you are charging $40 for entry though, people do expect a certain amount of effort to have been made by the event organisers. This is vitally important. Well, the police had to be called recently because the event in Glasgow angered families, who in turn demanded refunds. It was advertised as a journey filled with wondrous creations and enchanting surprises at every turn, so some of the words ripped off a song and a little extra on top. Many of those that attended, though, said it was nothing more than an empty warehouse, and much of what they received basically left the children crying, and the parents for wasting essentially £35. The pound is quite weak at the moment, if you haven't noticed. Now, the organisers, House of Illuminati, have cancelled the events following all the complaints and have said full refunds will be given to everyone who bought tickets. Here is another picture of another angle. Here's another angle. As you can tell, it doesn't quite look as wondrous. It just looks like a little bit of money spent on a couple bits of tat to vaguely make it look like an incomplete project, a diorama in progress that is yet to be finished or fully realised. With the space you inhabit, this could be considered a form of soft play, but without the fun you get from soft play. If anyone's been to what I've called soft play, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When your promotional pictures are this, or this, and you provide this, you're setting yourself up to fail a bit. But let's read something from their website. Welcome to Willy's Chocolate Experience. That sounds a bit inappropriate. Dive into the whimsical of Willy's Chocolate Experience, a place where chocolate dreams become reality. Book your adventure now and embark on a journey filled with wondrous crêblés. Enchanted Garden. Your journey begins in an enchanted garden with giant sweets, vibrant blooms, mysterious-looking sculptures, and magical surprises that add an extra layer of wonder to your chocolatey experience. With these black curtains, do you really think there's much of that going on here? There are within this little gated community, as it were, all the other rooms, the Imagination Lab, the Twilight Tunnel. The images you've seen promoting this event, this 2-day event, were generated by AI. Well, that's not going to help AI, is it now? The face behind this con is Billy Cool. He has published 17 ChatGPT novels on Amazon, is the director of the House of Illuminati, and has been in the news for doing things as dumb as, for example, cancelling a Santa's Grotto event at a community hub after toys had already been donated for it. The script that many of the performers at this event had to work under was in fact AI-generated gibberish. There was a villain in this called the Unknown, an evil chocolate maker who lives in the walls. The event itself had no chocolate. Kids were given a single jelly bean and a cup of lemonade. I see we're really splashing out and making sure that caloric intake is low. This got memed to high hell, for example. We had Kate Middleton at the Willy Wonka Experience. She hasn't been seen for a while. And you have two Oompa Loompas who looked so happy to be there, stood behind a bar that looked cheaper than a flat pack from Argos. The man that was charged with portraying Willy Wonka in this is a comedian called Paul Connell. He is the person that told us that he had been given 15 pages of AI-generated gibberish. Everything was so cheaply and shoddily put together. This comedian's contract was spelt with an extra O in it. Not entirely sure on YouTube I can get away with saying that. They misspelt his own contract of employment. This is professionalism at its finest, everyone. But he did know ahead of time this was going to fail because he had to go to rehearsals. And the day before this event took place, he conceded it is a world of imagination. Like, imagine that there is a whole chocolate factory here. I spoke to the people running it and thought surely by the morning it won't look like this, and then I turned up in the morning and it absolutely did. At the end of my monologue, I was supposed to suck up the unknown man with a vacuum cleaner. I asked them if they had a vacuum cleaner and they said, yeah, we haven't really got there yet, so just improvise. so we ended up cutting things out, thinking it would be silly. I feel sorry for the actors, by the way, involved in this, because many require work so they'll do these kinds of jobs. They are not to blame for the lackluster attempt at trying to make an immersive experience for children, latching onto and hopping on the bandwagon of a success like the Timothée Chalamet Willy Wonka movie, who have in turn made something, well, cheaper than Poundland. I'm almost certain I could have done better with some Sharpies and some pound stretcher wallpaper. I would have at least bought some chocolate from Sainsbury's with me, a bag of swag so they could at least enjoy something, and some dairy free for those who are lactose intolerant, of course. Billy Cool, yes, you are a cheapskate con man who ripped off so many people and ended up paying them back anyway. What was the bleeding point of creating these images to make it seem like you were going to actually put on a moderate display for children, only to be found to be still to be a con man who can't be asked to make any effort and rely solely on AI and ChatGPT to do anything for you? You are lazy. And I know we could rail on the parents for paying for this up front, booking their spaces as it were and attending this, but even though the expectation was high, if they'd made a little bit more effort, this could have been something better. But it sounds to me like somebody put far too much money in those stands and just ran out of money because they couldn't be asked to try. Apparently you may have published 17 books on ChatGPT, but you're still a broke-ass bitch. In keeping with the theme of movies, we're going to talk now about Madame Web, a movie I didn't know was happening, a movie I paid very little attention to, a movie I didn't actually think they were going to waste their time making, but Sony will literally put money into things knowing they're going to lose. They did it with Ghostbusters back in 2016, and they carried on doing it with movies that pushed an agenda. Whether or not this one is included in that, I'm not entirely sure, but they're willing to keep throwing money at something that is a sinking ship. In the franchise history of Spider-Man, Madame Web is highly likely now to be the least successful in the history of Sony's Spider-Man universe, doing even worse than Morbius in its opening weekend box office. This film stars Dakota Johnson, who is in that 50 Shades of Shite. It has been panned by critics. It has 13% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, 3.8 out of 10 on IMDb. It is less popular than any film in the SSU, Sony Spider-Man universe, as well as the MCU and DCEU. In its opening weekend, it made $49 million, 23.4 domestic, 25.7 internationally. It was annihilated by Bob Marley. Now, the genre of movie biopics has been quite popular, more popular of late than the superhero franchise movies. Bob Marley's movie is smashing it right now, quite frankly, and understandably so. Ahead of the movie's release, the reviews were so bad, and they were not helped by Dakota Johnson, who had been giving some somewhat unhinged commentary, which didn't help at all. It wasn't like with Captain Marvel, where Brie Larson could say anything and the movie still made $1 billion, because at that point in the MCU, Phase 3, the MCU was still at its peak, a peak they've yet to regain, because most of the superhero movie genre is going down. But I guess that's what happens when you put out too much. The quality is expected to get better and better. When you plateaued and then declined, it was because you started doing the very thing you were warned against, but thought, I'm above this. And in the case of Madame Web, that is the opinion that seems to be accepted. The movie budget was originally $80 million. It is believed that that is unlikely to be recovered, or a profit turned. It gets worse when you find that actually the budget was close to $100 million, but the studio was able to get it under that because of tax credits in Massachusetts and London, where post-production work was done. The anti-hero genre within the hero sort of area, started off pretty strong with Venom. Venom made $856 million. The sequel, $507 million. To be honest, not bad considering the pandemic around that time. Morbius was a massive fail, but it did at least raise awareness to the fact that Let There Be Carnage wasn't a fluke. Sony are still pushing with this though, these anti-hero movies. For example, Kraven the Hunter is next for Sony, coming out in, I think, August, just ahead of the sequels Beetlejuice and Transformers 1, both of which have higher expectations, yes. And I beg that Beetlejuice does not do us dirty, because honestly, Michael Keaton is a treasure, and he was done dirty in The Flash. According to a brand expert though, the reason for the movie flopping wasn't because of Dakota Johnson's comments. Those comments come from Doug Eldridge of Achilles PR, who said the lack of critical and commercial success of this film does not fall squarely on Dakota's shoulders. There is a recent string of superhero movies which have fallen flat at the box office for reasons beyond mere PR missteps by their stars. The Rock is arguably the largest draw at the international box office, yet Black Adam was dead on arrival. Similarly, in an ever-expanding superhero lexicon, Captain Marvel, Morbius and Bloodshot are just a few of the titles which never found their foothold as the market for capes and tights is getting increasingly crowded and less appealing to the broader viewing audience. Now, to an extent, Doug is correct about the genre as a whole, but actually in individual cases, this can be explained. Black Adam, no one cares about Black Adam. Legitimately, they are not mainstream enough, regardless of Dwayne's passion for the project, and the movie still made a profit. I believe it was up to $80 million. That's not bad. I know they expected more, but they still made profit. The Captain Marvel sequel, called The Marvels, fell flat because it was trash. Also, it seemed to indicate at one part of the movie that Captain Marvel had a taste for younger blood. Not a joke, by the way. It was a legit scene in the movie. Bloodshot, I believe, featured in the Suicide Squad movie. No one cares about the Suicide Squad in this way. And when the first Suicide Squad movie came out, we only saw more of the Joker in the extended cut, which did not save the movie. And Morbius, to be honest, fell flat because I remember seeing Morbius in the Spider-Man comics and the cartoons on TV. Morbius was never really a bigger character, always a support, never a mainstream character. If these movies are falling flat, they're falling flat because no one cares. The only movie that came out that should have done better, but failed for multiple reasons, the story being one of them, and the lead actor another, was The Flash. That was horrendous. Madame Web is a strange one because I can tell you hand on heart, much like Dakota Johnson, I knew nothing about Madame Web before it even happened. But Sony felt it right to push ahead with this one when, much like every other Spider-Man or influenced character there is, there's much source material to go with. They've come up with something that people didn't want. And then they allowed their stars to speak in a way that did not help them on the press release tour, the publicity campaign, to promote your product. By the way, Dakota Johnson never sits in on the premieres. When they start, she leaves. She's renowned for it. She hasn't seen the final product, so she can't speak on whether or not it's good or bad, which to an extent I can also understand. Why would you want to watch yourself back? But then if you want some critical thought, you do need to be able to see the final product so you can offer criticism where criticism needs to exist. The director S.J. Clarkson has failed this movie, but so have those involved in it. And Sony for making it at a time when these kind of movies aren't as interesting anymore. Maybe they should do some biopics if they actually want to make money. Honorable mention goes to Twitch, courtesy of my friend Benji Simon. Tired of hashtag Twitch pretending they're doing things like this to help us. Want to get us paid more? How about you just fix that 50-50 split on subs or lower the price so more people consider subscribing? The reason he has tweeted this is because Twitch are upping the subscription fees. In Twitch's statement, they claim more money goes to the streamer, but then the money they get they would receive for that 50-50 split, even partners now have a 50-50 split as opposed to a 70-30 split in their favour, not Twitch, the partner, would then go back into improving the quality and the long-term future of streaming. I retweeted Ben by pointing out that I am now seriously giving consideration to switching full-time to Kick. I might even start dual streaming because that would make the transition easier. Twitch, you are upping your fees to a level where it is unreasonable. I charge less for a membership on this channel. I would encourage more people to not subscribe to me on Twitch and instead donate bits or become a patron because they get more value for money than simply giving you half the money for the privilege of using your site. Much like YouTube with super chats, where they take a phenomenal cut. Kick don't do that. Kick give you, the user, 95%, I believe, and it would be slightly different or more to the creator, but I believe that cut is actually transaction fee based. Twitch has, much like YouTube, a certain monopoly in these areas, and I find it quite embarrassing that we are having to, as streamers or as creators, we are being put on the back foot because Twitch subs we have no control over the price of. YouTube memberships I have control of, which is why I made them quite low to begin with. Same with Patreon tiers. Twitch micromanage and control too much. And when they say they want to improve things for everyone, really they just mean themselves. To the final subject, we are going to address consequences for members of Just Stop Oil, because after much in the way of waiting, we are now starting to receive consequences. We, the public, get to observe them at the very least. Courtesy of GB News, 3 protesters have been found guilty of aggravated trespass at Wimbledon. Deborah Wilde, Simon Milner Edwards and William Ward are those found guilty, aged 69, 67 and 66. They disrupted tennis matches by throwing confetti and puzzle pieces. They entered Court 18 on the 5th of July last year during a match between Grigor Dimitrov and Sho Shimabukuro. Bodycam footage played to the court showed them wearing Just Stop Oil t-shirts. The judge did accept that, at least in this instance, they waited for a break in play, adding though, nevertheless, I find as a fact that each of them intended to cause disruption to the tennis, and as a result they did cause some disruption on that day. They denied the protest on the court amounted to aggravated trespass. I feel sorry for the ground staff and the ball boys and ball girls because they were the ones having to pick up all that crap you left behind. And yet again you proved your middle class credentials like everyone within Just Stop Oil. You bought tickets to a tennis match and then you ran onto the pitch. Things like this caused an increase in security and checks. Wild and Ward were each given a 6-month conditional discharge and Milner Edwards an 18-month conditional discharge. At their age, this means sod all, they're just running down the clock at this point. Another person though, Just Stop Oil protester who delayed thousands, was convicted over an M25 protest. This is Cressida Gethin. Cressida Gethin scaled the gantry above the M25 near Heathrow Airport in July 2022. 4,000 airline customers were affected by this. She protested because the day before, the country had experienced its hottest temperature on record at 40 degrees. She did not dispute scaling the gantry, but denied it amounted to the charge of causing a nuisance. 3,923 British Airways customers were affected by cancellations and delays. And you're saying you didn't cause a nuisance? She was guilty of causing a public nuisance contrary to the Police, Crime Sentencing and Courts Act of 2022 by a majority of 10-2. The judge even said that Gethin, who self-represented, had said that the evidence of climate change was relevant to the case. The judge said no. In the case of Cressida, she is not due to be sentenced until May the 3rd, but I would expect there to be a suspended sentence of some kind. Her youth on her side, and if she was smirked, she would have played some kind of mental health issues to downplay the severity of what she'd done or imply that she was not in control of herself when she committed the crime she has been convicted of. As far as I'm concerned, the law is quite clear on these things, and one must uphold it because you middle-class tosspots, plonkers, toffs, morons, dipshits, are all the same to me. Middle-class white trash. Get over yourselves and get a job.